Chapter 50. I sat at the front desk waiting for Hank to get home. He and Fred had gone to an Angels baseball game. It was getting to be rush hour. I stared at the cars crawling down Coast Boulevard, muttering, come on," under my breath. When at last I spotted Hank's pickup coming down the road, I ran outside waving my arms. Breathlessly, I told him and Fred what happened. "I knew it," Hank said, throwing his Angels baseball cap onto the ground. "What did I tell you, Fred? It was an inside job. The guy probably thought he could pull a 30-day special." "What's a 30-day special?" I asked. "A 30-day special is when someone reports his car got stolen, but it's not really stolen," Fred said. "He's just hiding it for 30 days. My mind was swarming with questions. "Why 30 days?" "Because that's how long most insurance companies take to settle the claim," Hank explained. "The insurance company probably gave him a big fat check for the price of his car." "And what happens to the car?" Hank shrugged. "He could try to sell it to someone or sell it for parts." "That's probably what he was doing when we went over there," I said. "We have to call the police." I grabbed the phone and dialed the number for Officer Phillips. This time, Officer Phillips actually listened. He and his colleagues went straight over to Mr. Lorenz's house, where they watched him for a while and eventually caught him red-handed trying to sell his stolen car. They arrested him on the spot for insurance fraud, money laundering, and a whole bunch of other bad stuff I'd never even heard of before. "He'll be going away for a long, long time," Officer Phillips said when he came over later that night. That was a relief, considering the last thing Mr. Lorenz said to me. Officer Phillips shook my hand and thanked me for cracking the case. I was all smiles. My mom and dad joked that maybe I could get a job on the force one day. Officer Phillips chuckled and was about to turn to leave when I nudged him and pointed toward Hank's room. Officer Phillips sighed, but he followed me over. Hank answered on the first knock, then frowned when he saw who it was. Officer Phillips looked similarly unthrilled, but nevertheless, he muttered an apology for having wrongly accused Hank. "You know what that cost me? It cost me my job," Hank said. "Again, I'm sorry," Officer Phillips said flatly. Hank looked him straight in the eye. "Don't be sorry. Be better," Hank said. "Next time you accuse a black man, stop and think." Officer Phillips looked away and didn't say anything. That night, my mother and father came into my room. "We're proud of you," they said. "Even though you went into a stranger's house," my mom tisk-tisked, but I could tell she wasn't really mad. They took a seat at the foot of my bed, and my mother reached for my hand. "Do you still remember asking me a while back why we came to America?" she asked. I nodded. "This is why," she said. "Because of 30-day specials?" I asked. Mom chuckled and shook her head. "No, sweetheart," she said, "because here, people are innocent until proven guilty. For the most part, at least. That's what you saw tonight." Slowly, my parents started telling me about something that happened in China a long time ago, called the Cultural Revolution. The Cultural Revolution was a political movement that took place in China in the 1960s and 70s. My parents said that during the Cultural Revolution, my grandparents were locked up and shipped away. It didn't matter whether they actually did anything wrong. "That's why we left, so that something like that wouldn't happen to you," my dad said. Tonight, seeing that police officer arrest Mr. Lorenz and actually come back here and apologize to Hank, okay, he didn't really want to apologize, but still he did. I know I made the right decision. America may not be perfect, but she's free, and that makes all the difference. I finally understood what my parents meant by free. Chapter 51. I hopped and skipped over to the Topaz Inn the next afternoon to tell the security guard the good news. "You can rip up that ridiculous list of yours," I told him, but he just shrugged. "Better safe than sorry," he said. "But I just told you, Hank didn't do it. Neither did Mrs. Robinson or any of the other black customers. Mr. Lorenz did it. He's the one you should put on the list. No matter what I said, though, the crazy security guard refused to get rid of his list. He kept saying, "It's a free country. I can do whatever I want." I wanted to shake him and say, "You're not getting it. That's not what free means. Free means innocent until proven guilty, not guilty no matter how innocent." I stormed back to the Cala Vista. Hank was in the parking lot chatting with some customers. As soon as he saw my face, he asked, "What's wrong?" He followed me inside the front office, and I told him what happened. "What do we do?" I asked him. Hank didn't say anything for a long time. Then he reached across the front desk and grabbed a blank piece of paper. "Do what you do best," he said, putting the paper in front of me. "Will you help me?" I asked Hank. "Sure." He nodded. That afternoon, we worked together on the letter. I wrote most of it, but Hank helped me with certain key words like discriminatory, a word I did not know before. Dear Stores, I know that the security guard from the Topaz Inn gave you a list of bad customers, but it is not actually a list of bad customers. It is a list of black customers. He put them on the list because he seems to think that all black customers are bad. But that's, number one, not true, and number two, incredibly discriminatory. I know it's not true because my good friend is black, and he is one of the kindest people I know. Also, I just solved a case involving a stolen car, and guess what? The thief was not black. Actually, he wasn't even a thief. He was the owner. That just goes to show you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. So I'm asking you to please tear up the list. Let's treat all our customers with kindness and respect and not judge anyone by the color of their skin. If you have any questions, please call me at 555-281-0482. Sincerely, Mia Tang, Assistant Manager, Cala Vista Motel. I was very proud of our little letter, and so was Hank. Hank said I hit the issue on the nose, which made me smile. I wrote out 10 copies of the letter by hand and went door to door to all the shops on our street. At most stores, the person inside barely looked at my letter and just put it aside, said they'd read it later. But then, back at the motel, my phone started ringing. First, the man from the liquor store called up. "Darn right you shouldn't judge a customer by the way they look. I mean, heck, if I judged all my customers by the way they look, I'd be out of business. Half of my customers can't even walk straight," he said. I ticked yes next to the liquor store in my notebook. The guy at the convenience store on our street called up next. His voice shook as he spoke. "I came over from the Philippines 7 years ago," said Mr. Abayan. "I'd forgotten what it's like to be judged. I'm ripping the list up right now." That was a yes for the convenience store. The laundromat called up next. "I never used his silly list anyway. Clothes are clothes. Doesn't matter to me who they're on," said Mr. Bhagwati. Yes for the laundromat. 8 yeses later, it was just down to the 2 other motels, Lagoon Motel and Topaz Inn. I knew Topaz Inn was out, but Lagoon Motel I still had a shot at. I grabbed my letter and headed over there again. The manager was an old guy with a raspy voice. He frowned when he saw me. "What do you want?" he said. "Did you read my letter?" I asked. "Yeah, I read your letter," he said. "And?" "I don't know," he said. "Don't get me wrong, kid. I get where you're coming from, but you and I both know that every time we push that buzzer, we are judging someone based on the way they look. I mean, it's not like we're judging them based on their personality or how they eat a fig. We're making a quick 10-second decision based on what they look like," he said. "But that's different," I said. "How's it different?" "It's not based on their skin color," I said. "It's based on other things, like are they walking funny, which probably means they're drunk? Are they pounding on the front door, or are they knocking politely?" "Yeah, but if you think about it," I could tell he's one of those people who just love to argue, and we were going to be there all day, so I decided to cut the chase. "Look, I've got 7 shops who've agreed to not follow the list, plus us. If you join us, great. If you don't join us, I'm going to write a letter to the mayor's office." "Gosh darn it, kid," he harumphed, throwing his arms up in the air. "You and your letters. Are you in or are you out? I asked him firmly. There was a long pause. Fine, I'm in, he said. In the end, even Topaz Inn caved too. I told our towel and sheet supplier, who also happened to be their supplier and was African American. Once he heard about the list, he marched over to the Topaz Inn and threw a fit, threatening to stop selling them supplies unless they cut it out. Without a supplier for their towels and bedding, the Topaz Inn could not operate their business, so they had no choice but to get rid of their list. They apologized and blamed it all on their security guard, whom they promptly fired. As the security guard crawled by a day after the Topaz let him go, he hollered at me, "You happy now? You cost me my job, kid." I shook my head at him. From the way he was walking, I could tell he'd been drinking. We Chinese are supposed to watch out for each other. Not if you're being racist. My life's ruined because of you. I turned my back to him, but that just made him more mad. Hey, I'm talking to you. Yeah, you. You're sitting there in your nice air-conditioned office. But you think it's all fun and games, don't you? Well, guess what? He slurred. It's not. You have no idea what it's like for the rest of us. You don't know what it's like to be fired, to have no money and nowhere to go. That did it. You have no idea what I know, I yelled back at him. I've been getting fired since before you could read. I could write a book on what it's like to have no money. You know what else I know? That's no excuse to treat other people like dirt. The security guard walked away without another word. Read chapters 52 and 53 independently tonight. Add to the blog.